Jumping back now into the action here on the show and looking at another game that, again, just completely took me by surprise just based on the result, and then looking back on it on how the Arizona Cardinals played. Definitely not a result I was expecting at all. I predicted the Jets would win, but I guess I was also just fooled and blinded by the Garrett Wilson amazing catch, Davante Adams having a good game. More so, maybe it was just the Houston Texans having a bad game overall. But yeah, I mean, we talked at one point this year how Arizona had not won really consecutive games since 2021, I believe, and now, believe it or not, they've won four games in a row with this latest game. They're on a 4-game win streak, which was something I definitely didn't have on the cards in 2024. And yeah, they remain in first place in their division. Arizona was victorious on Sunday over the Jets, 31-6. They dominated New York from the start of the game all the way through the end to stay on top of the NFC West and stay at a good record. You know, they're 6-4 right now. To put it into context a little bit, they have the same record as, you know, the Falcons, and people highly regard them in their division. But you could certainly make the argument that in conversation that the Falcons division is nowhere near where the Cardinals division is, and they're both in first place with the same record. So I thought that was pretty interesting looking at it again. And also on the Jets side of things, you know, their playoff hopes were all but wrapped up. We mentioned it in the preview that they had to win this game because there's tougher games coming. You need to win the game against Houston. They were able to do that. The game against, you know, this game against the Cardinals, they certainly needed to get, even though it was on the road across the country, there's tougher games coming. So for them to lose this game, I feel very down about their playoff chances now. I don't think they're mathematically eliminated, but at 3-7, there's 3 teams ahead of them now for that wild card spot, and I want to say, they're 2 games behind, technically behind the Broncos. So they're right there, but still, it's too inconsistent for me with this Jets team. And especially in this game, you know, you thought we would see a closer game, but Arizona never trailed in this game at a single point, in large part because of how well Kyler Murray played. He completed a franchise record 17 passes in a row at one point in this game. And Arizona's defense too, you know, for as I think, not belittled, because that's not the word I want to use, but I think just in context and comparing the offense to the defense, I think most people would say that the Cardinals' offense is definitely a couple steps ahead of where they want their defense to be. But to their credit, they didn't allow a touchdown in a 3rd straight home game in a row. And, you know, they held the Jets to 6 points after they had a very impressive performance against the Texans, like I said. And these are Kyler Murray's stats, a great game overall for him. But before we get to the stats and everything, you know, just lastly here on the Jets, they lose their 6th game out of their last 7 now, and they're 1-4 since firing Robert Saleh. You know, not to add more salt to an open wound, but it's I think it just goes back to it's too erratic, to just inconsistent for me. You know, you get great performances, but other times you get 6-point games. And Aaron Rodgers even mentioned it after the game as well. They're not going to beat anybody with this sort of offense performance. So it's disappointing, definitely, but I mean, a lot of people could have predicted it with all the moves that they made and just how, you know, desperate these moves seemed. You know, you can't fault them for trying, but it's definitely not what consistent, you know, top teams do at this point in the year. So talking about the Jets here a little bit more and focusing on them, Aaron Rodgers on the day had 151 yards, 22 completions on 35 attempts. Breece Hall, you know, had an okay game. He had 52 rushing yards on 10 carries. And Garrett Wilson had 6 targets, 5 receptions, 41 yards. Davante Adams had 13 targets and 6 receptions. Just not what you'd expect for 2 guys that have played together for so long. It just hasn't clicked really, other than the last game against Houston. But overall, from the sample size that we have, it's really just been a disconnect, which is crazy to say for their time that they spent in Green Bay. But really those two guys were the main stages of this offense. Breece Hall had the second most receiving yards, along with Devontae Adams with 31, and then everything else really just was just non-existent for the Jets in this game. And for the Cardinals, though, starting with Kyler Murray, he only had 2 incompletions, which is insane. 266 passing yards, 3 total touchdowns. He had 1 passing one and 2 rushing ones on the day. He's been included in a couple MVP conversations I've seen recently on social media or just watching TV. I'm not saying he's going to win. I don't think anybody's saying he's going to win, but he's playing very, very good for a quarterback, too, that also had a lot of scrutiny going into this year, but also the years before. The amount of money that he got and people, clowning him a little bit for the Call of Duty stuff and just not being a team leader and things like that. I think he's proven a lot of people wrong. And maybe the way he does it isn't for everybody, but it's definitely getting results now. And Jonathan Gannon will tell you the same thing. He was very complimentary of his quarterback after the game as well. In this game, the Cardinals also, their rushing attack had 147 yards and 3 total touchdowns. Receiving-wise, Trey McBride had a decent day, 71 yards. Marvin Harrison scored, and he had 54 yards as well. And James Conner had 80 receiving yards and 5 carries to add on to 33 rushing yards on 12 carries for him as well. So just complete dominance, complete and utter dominance from the Cardinals in this game. A remarkable first half, like I kind of alluded to there, because the Cardinals had 4 drives total in the first half, and they scored touchdowns on 3 of them and 1 other field goal. So they didn't leave any points on the board really, other than the field goal, I guess, because you want to score touchdowns. But they did not score in any of these drives. So that was great to see. And just on each of these drives, all of their drives in the first half were 6 plays or more and 49 yards or more. 3 of their drives were 9 plays or more and 70 yards at least for 3 of their drives. That's as, dominant and just steady and consistent offense as you would ever dream of in any game in the NFL. So credit to the Cardinals there again. And the Cardinals led 24-6 already at halftime, but the Jets did have an opportunity here, maybe if you go for 2, where they were on the field, because they got the ball first in the second half, but they got to a 4th and goal where, again, if you score a touchdown there and you add a 2-point conversion, you're at 14. So the game's not completely over, but they faced that 4th and goal, and on a 10-play drive as well. They were able to orchestrate this very good, steady drive of 10 plays or more. And the moment where they needed a touchdown, they obviously foregone the field goal, because at this point you need touchdowns. But they failed to convert that 4th and goal. I think Rodgers was sacked and he fumbled on that play, so that was a real killer overall to their chances of coming back in this game. And from that point on, Arizona scored a touchdown on their first drive to make matters worse, right? After the Jets squandered their best opportunity to get back into it, the Cardinals go down and score and make it 31-6. And that was pretty much it after that. There wasn't too much more to report on this game, but I'd say, in terms of the question that I posed a little bit in the teaser to this segment, have the Jets fooled us, or have the Cardinals just been flying completely under the radar, and should we pay more attention to them as legitimate division contending, winners? I would say it's a little bit of both, just because the Jets really are, I guess the Jets really are not that good. It's my own fault for kind of believing in them after last week. Garrett Wilson looking like Odell Beckham Jr. on those catches, Devontae Adams seeming to finally find a groove, but in reality, I guess it's just Houston really didn't play that great. Their offensive line got dominated, and in this game, the pressure that we saw from the Jets really wasn't there against the Cardinals, and I think that goes for everybody, because Kyler Murray might be the hardest quarterback to get on the ground and actually wrap up, because with the bigger guys, they're stronger, They fight through tackles and whatnot, but actually, for a defensive lineman to get near Kyler and bring him down for his stature and how quick he is, it has to be a nightmare. So that also has a lot to do with it. But I think also just Arizona too are starting to get my attention a lot more. In this game, they had about 70% success rate on third down. They had double the amount of total yards that the Jets had. Double the amount of passing yards that they had as well, and double the amount of rushing yards that they had compared to the Jets. And they were 4 of 5 in the red zone as well in this game. So you, other than going perfect in all those situations like red zone and third downs, you can't ask for more of a perfect game from the Arizona Cardinals. And now looking forward in terms of legitimately competing for this division, their schedule is not really that hard outside of their divisional games, right? Because after this, they have an away game to Seattle, an away game to Minnesota, which aren't easy, but the way Minnesota's been playing and Seattle not looking great, they're not impossible games. Then they play Seattle again right after that at home because they haven't played them yet once. Then they have New England at home. They travel to Carolina. They're on the road against the Rams, and they finish it off with a home game against the 49ers. And we haven't seen them yet against Seattle, but Seattle hasn't looked great. They already blew out the Rams in Arizona, I believe, in week 2. So they've already beat them. And against San Francisco, they already beat them too. So based on what we've seen already, the rest of this schedule isn't like they're going to lose the majority of these games. They've beaten 3 of these opponents that they're going to play, and Minnesota and New England, and obviously Carolina. Carolina and the Panthers aren't great, and Minnesota has shown a lot of weaknesses. So I'm not going to commit that they're going to win the division yet, but they're right there. They're really making it hard for me to change my pick, and I know I was so adamant about the Rams winning this division and completely disregarding the Cardinals, but the Rams really disappointed me, and I really didn't like seeing them not score a touchdown against the Dolphins that I really thought had no business being in that game. But maybe the Cardinals, why not the Cardinals, surprising a lot of people in 2024. So they really put their name down on the table as one of the true, sneaky teams in the NFL so far. So we'll see how it all kind of continues to play out for them in 2024. But now, moving on to another topic here, the last recap I wanted to get into in Week 10. We had to talk about the Eagles and the Cowboys, of course, because leading up into this season, before any games were played, this one was a matchup that I'm sure was circled on a bunch of calendars. But, of course, knowing what we know now, it hasn't turned out that way. But we'll talk about the Eagles, what we learned from them, and the Cowboys also, what happened during the game, but also after the game as well. So we'll be right back. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.